everyone. Hi. It's great to see you. It's great to be with you. We want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we welcome you to the 5th Annual Emory Healthy Brain Study Participant Appreciation event. So this event is for you. It gives you a chance to engage with our study team, to engage and be in fellowship with other participants. We're also going to share some really interesting updates from the Emory Healthy Brain Study and our research efforts. I also have to say, I don't know about you guys, but I'm very excited because today is our first in-person event since 2019. So I'm your host, Jay Watson. I'm a career journalist. I'm now at Emory Brain Health, and I'm the co-executive producer and host of Your Fantastic Mind, which is a nationally syndicated show on PBS. And you may recognize some of our stars here at the table because we feature Emory faculty in our show and cover all things brain-mind related. Today, you are going to hear presentations from our 4 speakers, and then there's going to be Q&A. And throughout the program, and I don't know if there's going to be a slide up, but you can submit any questions by texting, and I'm going to give you the number if you guys have your pens. Oh, good, they have it up. All right, but still, you're going to have to write it down. 404-913-4392. So you can text any questions to that number. Some of those questions, you're going to get immediate answers back, and ones that you can't get immediate answers, they'll be up here for the main Q&A. Or you can write questions down on the slip of paper at your table, and we have volunteers that are going to be coming around and collecting them. We ask that you guys remain seated during presentation, but we know you have to leave, so when you leave, just do it quietly. I mean, don't holler on your way out of the room. At this time, I get to do introductions, and I will tell you, they're a little long, but the people up here, I don't know how they have families or sleep. I'm being honest. They work incredibly hard for this cause, and they're in charge of like a zillion things, as you're about to hear. So at this time, I get to introduce Dr. Jim Law. Yay, Dr. Law. All right, here we go. Dr. Law is a cognitive neurologist and associate professor. In his clinical work, Dr. Law has developed a multidisciplinary team devoted to providing the best possible care and support for patients and families with Alzheimer's and related diseases. His current research is focused on improving our understanding of the early evolution of Alzheimer's disease in its silent asymptomatic stages and advancing efforts to prevent clinical disease. He serves as clinical core leader and associate director of the Emory-Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, director of the Cognitive Neurology Program, director of the statewide Georgia MemoryNet, and the principal investigator of the Emory Healthy Brain Study. He will be sharing some study updates with you and provide insight into the future of EHBS. Now, immediately following Dr. Law, we're going to get to hear from the marvelous Dr. Monica Parker. Dr. Parker joined the Emory University School of Medicine faculty in 1995 as medical director of the Emory Clinic of Social Circle. She has transitioned roles as a geriatric primary care provider to that of a clinical research investigator. She serves as the director of both outreach, recruitment, and education and minority engagement cores for Emory-Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. She also provides national service on the FDA's Patient Engagement Advisory Committee and to the Commission on Continuing Professional Development for the American Academy of Family Physicians. Woo! I got through it. She will be speaking to you all about the importance of participating in research. First we begin, please give a warm welcome to both Dr. Law and Dr. Parker.
Could you walk a little quieter, Jay?
Thank you guys all so much for being here and for helping us make this study possible. It's fantastic to see everybody here in person. It's been a long time, and it's been a lot of work getting here. And so first of all, I want to make sure that we acknowledge the huge team of really dedicated people that have made this study possible. And without them, this wouldn't be possible. And I want to give a special shout out to Chelsea. Where's Chelsea? Chelsea's back there, and she's had help, and there are others here who've helped put this event together, but I walked in here, I said, damn, this is the nicest wedding reception I've been to in months. So thank you guys, and for all of the team, and Najee, who you'll also see floating around, has taken leadership of the team to organize our scheduling and activities, and none of this would be possible without that fantastic team. So thank you guys. And we also have a very talented group of investigators, researchers, faculty members, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Parker, Dr. Chu, and Dr. Mitchell about some of the work. There's a lot of things happening, and so we can't bring everybody, but we wanted to highlight some of the things that we thought would be of interest to the participants here, and just give you a bit more of a flavor of what we do. Now, just to kind of set the stage, we all know that dementia and Alzheimer's disease are major health problems worldwide. Wait, I don't have to stand on this thing, do I? Am I on now? Oh, look at that. Damn. I was like, just because Jay's standing in front of the stupid podium, I don't have to. But this is a worldwide problem, and you see that the numbers are projected to increase quite dramatically at the current pace. It's basically unsustainable. It will bankrupt everybody, as well as causing untold suffering for millions of patients and families, which unfortunately many of you have experienced. And we talk about Alzheimer's disease because there's a lot of different conditions associated with aging and with brain disease that can cause cognitive decline and functional decline and result in dementia or decline in function as well as cognition. That's all dementia means. Dementia just means that you have lost or your abilities have declined, and they've declined to a point where there are some functional limitations. Those limitations may be mild, they may be more severe. But Alzheimer's disease is a very specific disease, one of many, but the most prevalent disease that causes dementia in older adults. And so that's why we focus so much on Alzheimer's disease. And before I talk about some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about in terms of biomarkers and understanding silent phases of Alzheimer's disease, there's a really important area that we all need to focus on. I think you've heard people say before that one of the problems with medicine is that we focus on treating disease, and that's really not how you win. The way that you win is by maintaining health. I don't care if it's cardiovascular health or brain health or cancer health. What you do is you want to prevent disease. So there was a really interesting report that came out of the Lancet Commission a couple of years ago, and they just did an exhaustive search of the literature and said, okay, what evidence is there to suggest things that we might be able to do to prevent dementias? And in early life, meaning before age 45, the single biggest factor was education. So you can't jump in a time machine and go back and say, oh, damn, I'm going to finish that doctorate now. But the more society advances to a point where everybody can have access to a high-quality education and higher education, that will be protective. In middle age, between 45 and 65, surprisingly, hearing loss, untreated hearing loss, was sort of the biggest sort of preventable cause or contribution to cognitive decline, and then you see some of the other factors. And in late life, meaning after age 65, smoking, depression, social isolation, those are also components that can be addressed in order to help prevent dementia in later life. When you add that all up, just those things that have decent evidence suggest that 40% of dementia can be prevented by these lifestyle interventions throughout the lifespan. And that leaves a significant amount, but 40% is a lot. If you imagine that just being able to eliminate 40% of dementia worldwide using these interventions, that's something that we need to take more and more seriously. Now, one of the other things that is important to understand, because this is a foundation for the Healthy Brain Study, and that is that Alzheimer's disease is a chronic disease no different from heart disease or colon cancer or breast cancer or anything else. So I actually went to see a primary care doctor for the first time in, I won't tell you how long, possibly ever. And so she's told me to do a number of things, and I haven't scheduled my colonoscopy yet, but I need to. And why do we do that? Not because it's fun, but because if you have a colonoscopy and you find a little polyp and you snip that sucker out of there, your cancer's cured, basically. And same with heart disease. You don't wait until somebody has a massive blockage of their left anterior descending and have a massive heart attack. You try and detect the blockages and prevent that heart attack from happening. So with Alzheimer's disease, what has become firmly established now is that there is an extended silent period of disease. So when I say Alzheimer's in clinic, people just freak out. It's like, oh my God, he just said the A word. And because the image that people get is what somebody looks like at the end stages of Alzheimer's disease when the debilitation has become profound. But in fact, what we're talking about studying with you all is silent Alzheimer's disease, when pathology may be present with zero symptoms. And we think that when people develop symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, there's been evolution of these changes in the brain for 10, 15, 20 years before symptoms start. So on the one hand, that may be a bit of a scary prospect, but on the other hand, that gives us an incredible opportunity, a window in which to intervene to try and prevent disease. And so that's the whole point of the Emory Healthy Brain Study. And look how we've done. So our ultimate goal is to get 3,000 participants in the study. And I pulled the numbers yesterday. I think these are current. So somebody in the next couple of weeks is going to be participant number 2,000. I feel like, you know, we ought to have like an extra good gift bag ready for that person, or maybe a $1 million check if we can get somebody to bankroll it. Ultimately, the goal is 3,000 participants, and you see that we have visits every couple of years, so the follow-up visits are increasing, and this is really important. In order to be able to assess how things change over time, you have to have longitudinal data. And now, with with all of your efforts, now you see that we have, 899 people who have had 3 visits. So that means first visit, second visit, third visit, 4 years apart, and then an increasing number of people coming into their 4th and 5th visits. So what that allows us to do now is take all of that information and look and see what we have from the first visit that might have predicted what's going to be in place by the 3rd or 4th or 5th visit. We hope everybody remains healthy and boring. That would be great. But we do know that some individuals will show evidence of disease and even decline. And we can help by sort of identifying that early, but we're not here to provide clinical care. What we want to do is use that information to see if we can't figure out how to predict what's going to happen 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years down the road by following this information over time. So we're making great progress. There's another really important element of this study. So this is a breakdown of our participants by race. And you see overall it's about 80% white participants, and then about 20% underrepresented minorities. And this is a really important focus for us. During the first few years of the study, we were doing even worse. But since 2021, because of our engagement with Monica Parker and her team and all of the folks who've been helping with community engagement, we've made significant gains. And so the goal ultimately is to have 1/3 of the participants, 1,000 participants, who are non-white participants. And that's because much of the data that we collect in this space and in other areas is really coming from one group of members of our society, and we want the results that we generate from this study to be relevant and applicable to everybody. So at some point, we'll stop enrolling additional white participants and really just focus on enrolling underrepresented groups so that the study results will apply to all people. So all of you know about this. Wait, how many of you in this room are actually part of the study, in the Healthy Brain Study? How many are not? Okay, good. So we said to bring an and one because we're going to use you to recruit for us. And one of the things that causes people to balk the most is this issue of the lumbar puncture, which I hope all of you know that is no big deal. But the importance of that is we can find things in that spinal fluid that will tell us about the presence of Alzheimer's disease, whether there's any symptoms or not. And Cassie is going to tell you a little bit more about some of the things that you can do with that fluid data. And what we can measure are these proteins associated with those two key pathologies, those amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles that are universal in Alzheimer's disease. And by measuring levels of the protein in that spinal fluid, that tells us whether Alzheimer's disease is present or not. There's another way to do it that's using a special scan, a PET scan using a dye. And we thought about incorporating this in the early design of the study, but each one of these scans costs over $1,500. So if we wanted 2,000 or 3,000 participants, what is that? A lot. Yeah. I'm Asian. I should be able to do that math in my head. But it's, that would be $4.5 million for 3,000 participants for just one scan each. And so we want to do that longitudinally. So it wasn't an option. But we do have the ability to see this pathology in living people. And what you're looking at there is binding of that dye in individuals who have increasingly severe levels of amyloid pathology. Now, the thing that we're really focusing on is looking at pathology in healthy people. So I told you that there's this 10, 15, 20-year window where people may have pathology without any evidence of disease. And so when we look at the spinal fluid, you see most of the people in that green circle, those are normal people and they have a normal or negative spinal fluid profile. But a significant proportion of them are in that red circle, which indicates positive Alzheimer's pathology. And on the PET scan, the upper right shows an individual who has no amyloid pathology and is healthy, while the others are individuals who have symptoms of Alzheimer's disease and amyloid pathology. But that individual in the upper right also is normal, has no symptoms, but has amyloid pathology. So what does that mean? So there is something that we're going to initiate soon that you will hear about. We're waiting for IRB approval for this. But there are questions. So I spoke with somebody recently who's been living in fear of Alzheimer's because of family history. And some bonehead that she saw decided, well, I'm going to run these tests you never asked for, and I'm going to tell you, you got the ApoE4 gene. And so she's been living in terror of this because she feels like it means she's doomed. And so one of the questions is, well, if mom had Alzheimer's, if dad had Alzheimer's, if they both had Alzheimer's, am I doomed to have Alzheimer's? If I fall into that red circle instead of that green circle and you tell me I have evidence of Alzheimer's pathology, am I doomed to get Alzheimer's disease? And the answer to that is no. It's not. Because when we look at brains of people who are normal, healthy when they died, about 1/3 of them have abundant evidence of Alzheimer's pathology, but they never got sick. Okay? And that's critically important. And I want you all to remember that, because if you ever want to get these test results, because we want to make them available to you, you're going to have to get that answer right. Okay? You're going to make you pass a test before you can get those results. So we know that we can detect silent Alzheimer's pathology. What we cannot do, and what we are striving to do with this study, is to be able to predict if and when somebody's going to actually develop symptoms of clinical disease. Because if you have pathology that doesn't cause any symptoms, who cares? And also, we need to better understand Alzheimer's disease in minority groups and underrepresented groups. And those are the remaining challenges that we're really seeking to overcome. So this is a draft template of what we've submitted to the Institutional Review Board, along with educational information that we're going to use for those of you who want to know about your ApoE genetic status or about your spinal fluid status, whether it's positive for the Alzheimer's risk gene or positive for those Alzheimer's markers. And if you want that information, it's not currently clinically actionable. Okay, so right now, as of today, you could get that information. There isn't anything that we can do that is proven to be beneficial yet, not yet. And so it's not currently actionable, so do you want that information? That's something you need to think about, because if you get that information, you ain't unringing that bell. If the answer is something you don't like, too bad, you're stuck with it. And so then you might feel like you're sitting with the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. So be thoughtful before, when we make this available, be thoughtful before you decide to seek out that information. Things will change though. Once things change, everything changes. So many of you know that the FDA approved treatment for Alzheimer's disease in July. And it's a drug called lecanemab. And it has, and I don't have time to go through any details about that, but we've started using this drug because it looks like if we use this drug to clear out the amyloid in patients in very early symptomatic stages, what we call mild cognitive impairment, it looks like it slows the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And why is that important? Because I told you, when I say Alzheimer's, people envision somebody who's in terminal late stages of disease. In earlier stages of disease, people may be functioning at or near normal, and you wouldn't really even know based on casual or not so casual interactions. It's only when things progress to a stage of severe debilitation that it's so bad. So if we can slow it down, that means when you get run over by a bus, you're still functioning pretty well, because ain't none of us getting out of this thing alive. But as long as we're here, we sure as heck would like to be able to enjoy interacting with our friends and family and loved ones. And if we can do that and prevent people ever from reaching those late stages of disease, that's a big win. But the logical next step is to push that forward and apply those therapies to see if we can delay or prevent disease. And that's happening in clinical trials right now. And so this is a study that's ongoing currently that's enrolling cognitively normal individuals who may be at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, who have evidence of pathology of Alzheimer's disease, and then testing this drug to see if it actually delays or prevents disease. Once a study like this proves itself and shows us unequivocally that we can delay or prevent disease, guess what? That issue of whether to find out that information or not is no longer a question. We're screening you just like we're doing your colonoscopy. If we can prevent disease, everything changes. There is no conundrum or dilemma about finding out that information. You want that information. And so when that day comes, everything will change. And then the last thing, how much time do I have, Nasha? You haven't held up the 3-minute thing yet. Damn it. Okay. So one other thing that we're initiating, and I wanted to make a point of telling you this so you didn't think we were like being creepy and stalking you or anything. So there is something called social determinants of health. And this is everything that you experience in the environment, in your life exposures, education, everything else. And we believe that lifelong, yeah, I got that, 3 minutes. And we believe that your exposures in life are going to have an enormous impact on your health and disease late in life. In fact, many of us believe that the influence of these social determinants are going to be more powerful than genetic influences when all is said and done. So if you happen to grow up or live in an environment that looked like this, or in an environment that looked like this, or Jay's house, environment that looks like this, your exposures are going to be very, very different. So if you think about all the stressors that are associated with living in poverty and maybe high crime, poor access to healthy foods, everything that goes with that environment can have a negative impact. So there is a beautiful project that was conducted by our friends at University of Wisconsin. They created something called the Neighborhood Atlas. And they took census tract data to map out all of those social determinants, education, income, access to health care, all of the things that contribute to your lived environment, and created this atlas that defines a deprivation index. So lower deprivation index is good, high deprivation index means it's bad. And this data is available for the state of Georgia and in neighborhoods. And you see that blue is actually low deprivation areas, and it's concentrated around the metro Atlanta area. But even within the metro area, you see that there's a large variety in terms of the ADI, or Area Deprivation Index, in our region. And so the idea that we had was, and this is the creepy stalking part, so we're not stalking, but what we did was we said, you know what if we use this data and then figure out where people lived, get their residential history, and then map this data using this Area Deprivation Index. And that's what we've done. We've created this database using public records to get residential history data that goes back, it only goes back as far as digital data does, right? So it only goes back to about the 80s for most things. But we're going to use that to create an aggregate Area Deprivation Index exposure. So your lifelong exposure for as far back as we can go based on residential history, and then use that to create this, we hope, a useful tool to use as a shorthand for these social determinants. And then we'll see and be able to demonstrate that those exposures either do or do not have an impact on people's risk of Alzheimer's disease or changes in biomarkers or imaging or anything else. So that's something that we're just starting. And so if somebody asks you, we're not planning on asking everybody about addresses and stuff, but if we ask you to confirm where you lived 30 years ago, don't think it's weird. I mean, it might feel a little weird, but it's for a good reason. We're not doing anything creepy with it, okay? So that's all I've got, and I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Parker for the next segment. And again, thank you all so much for your participation and for being here and helping us do this really important work.
Am I on? Good. I used to say he's a hard act to follow, but now I think we're equal. Okay. And I think it's really important for those gathered here, and I'm really grateful to see so many of you here. I feel responsible for lots of you. But more importantly, I think it's really good that many of you have brought a friend to learn more about clinical research. In the introduction, Jay told you that I used to be a doctor. I'm still a family medicine doctor. I just don't do as much of it as I used to. I still do it, just not as much. And part of that is because my new crusade is everybody needs to be healthy. And one of the things that I learned when I was working at Wesley Woods right alongside Dr. Law here, and he's really the reason I got into this at all. He says, do you really want to know how to do this? And I'm like, yeah, I really want to know how to do this. I'm never going to be the PhD scientist, but I'm the MD scientist that can wrangle people and talk to people and make what they find interpretable to the normal person. Because I used to teach English, so I'm correcting them all the time. Yeah, I used to teach high school English, so I try to help the doctors understand how illiterate they really are. So, one of the things that I want you to know is that you are part of a universe of research. The Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center is one of 37 different centers around the country where this kind of research is going on. Now, each center does something a little bit different, but there are 37 centers, 4 of which are exploratory centers, funded by the National Institutes of Health, National Institutes of Aging, to study Alzheimer's and related dementias and healthy aging. What makes this group age better than this one versus that one? And what are the differences? What are some of the things that make it less likely that we'll develop Alzheimer's, okay? Jim spent a lot of time talking about that, and I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just trying to let you know that you're part of a huge universe. And many of you are a part of the Emory Healthy Brain Study. Some of you are also part of our memory study. You may also be a part of a movement study, anything. I'm just going to tell you whatever flavor of research you're interested in, join it. And why? Because every time you participate in clinical research, you're making use of the tax dollars that you put into the system, first of all. But secondarily, you're learning more about how to take care of yourself and how to take care of your family members and learning more about what resources are available. You know, Newt Gingrich said about 10 or 15 years ago when I started this, he said, healthcare, people in the United States think healthcare is a right. He said healthcare is a luxury. And it's not an accident when you find out that when you're a smoker, you pay a higher insurance premium. Why? Because you're doing something that makes it more likely for you to become sick and be a burden to the healthcare system and cost more in the long run. So I'm kind of like, okay, somebody is going to decide at some point in time that I'm not entitled to health insurance. So what is it that I need to do to keep myself from having to use it at all, which is what Jim is talking about. So here there are, as I said, 37 different Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. We're here in Georgia. The next closest two exploratory centers are in Birmingham, Alabama, and in Tennessee at Vanderbilt. You can see the written numbers, so if you have family members in other parts of the country, you want them to learn more about Alzheimer's, you want them to get an evaluation, you find one of these Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers. And if there is not an Alzheimer's Disease Research Center in the state, because there are only 37, there are not 50, find a medical center or a medical school which will likely have a resource for Alzheimer's research. So what is clinical research? All of you who are participating in the Emory Healthy Brain Study are actually participating in clinical research. That's research that has to do with human beings. So if we give you a questionnaire, that's research. You get a questionnaire in the mall, that's research. We may take some body fluid from you. We may take your saliva, your cerebrospinal fluid, any of those sorts of things. That's the research that you're participating in here. We have a number of different research studies here. We have more than 30 different studies. Some of them are clinical trials that have to do with drugs, but a lot of them are observational trials. That's what the Emory Healthy Brain Study is. They're not doing anything to you. We're observing. We're capturing information to try to better understand what makes it more likely for us to develop Alzheimer's. So we have prevention trials, as Jim alluded to, the AHEAD trial, and there's some other ones. But we also have studies that focus on hypertension and heart disease and their relationship to dementia. It's like, so why do we need to talk about high blood pressure? Why do we need to talk about heart disease? Why do we need to talk about diabetes? Because those are major risk factors for developing a dementing disorder. Notice I didn't say Alzheimer's, did I? Okay? So there are several different types of dementia, and all of them kind of feed into them. But a lot of cardiovascular disease and chronic illness, I'll get there, feeds into Alzheimer's. Okay, so this is my universe slide. Here in the middle, Monica. You have the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Here you have the Georgia Memory Net. You have a lot of things going on. If it wasn't for the Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, all these other things would not have existed, okay? You're in a universe. So many of you are in part of the Emory Healthy Brain Planet that's circulating in this galaxy. I'm just going to call it the Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, or now the Goizueta Institute Galaxy. There's a triage process. For those of you who are new, we have people that say, if I'm interested in research, where do I go? There's the clinical trials, which have to do with interventions and medications. And then there are the observational trials, which are on the other side. You can read them. You can learn more about them. I think there's tables out there where we can recruit people. There are several steps to enrolling in a study. We ask your permission, first of all, ask your permission to ask you questions, ask your permission to take your body fluids. And each study is different. They ask you to do different things. Each study lasts a different time. Depending upon what study you're in, the person who's talking to you will give you the particulars about that study. These are the things that we collect. Many of you have already been familiar with that. We want you to participate in research because it helps you to be a better consumer of healthcare, learn more about how you need to take care of yourself. And if you're a grandparent like me, you don't want your grandchildren to suffer from any of the illnesses that have taken your family members away from an earlier time. So if you want further information about Alzheimer's, I want you to go to our Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center site. You can learn more about the different studies we have. We have a lot of educational programming coming from our Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Every Tuesday from 2 to 3, we have Brain Talk Live. That is for you. It's all about healthcare information. We bring researchers from all over the country, not just Emory, here to talk about healthy aging topics. And twice a year we do our big forums. Look us up on Facebook. You can see all of our previously recorded programs. Again, we bring experts from all over the country and other research centers who may be doing other kinds of research. You're interested in research, for those of you who are new, don't know how to go about it, these are the contact people. Ms. Latasha Chapman is a research person. There are every study has a coordinator and a space, but if you get lost, can't figure it all out, call these people. Thank you.
Dr. Law has given me a complex. By the way, do you guys like my fabulous house? We're going to have a big party there tonight, and when you find out the address, you let me know. Okay. Our next speaker, I have to do a reminder, questions. Questions go to the number up there. Text questions, 404-913-4392, or you can write them on sheets of paper. Our next speaker is Dr. Deqiang Chu. Dr. Chu is an associate professor of radiology and imaging sciences of Emory University School of Medicine with a faculty appointment at the Joint Biomedical Engineering Program between Emory University and Georgia Tech. He is program director of MRI at the Center for Systems Imaging Core of Emory University School of Medicine, co-director of the Biomarker Core of the Emory Goizueta Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and leads the imaging component of the Emory Healthy Brain Study. He's going to provide us with some information and updates related to the study in brain imaging. Please welcome Dr. Chu.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you everybody for coming. So it's my great pleasure today to share with you some of the imaging updates from the study. So first of all, I'm going to talk about, in general, MRI imaging, and then in the second part of the talk, I'm going to talk about some of the findings we obtained from the Emory Healthy Brain Study. So on the left side of this slide, you can see a MR scanner. So it has a very strong magnetic field, and it can extract magnetic objects to it, and therefore, when we need to bring you into the magnet room, we need to screen you for any magnetic material. Probably all the participants here have gone through that process. And the way that MR scanner works is it sends waves to the object and then really listen back the echoes, much as like you send some sound waves and listen back to the echoes. But instead of sending sound waves, we send radio frequency waves to it. And this radio frequency is really the same kind of wave that your cell phone uses to communicate with other cell phones. It's also the same kind of radio wave that FM radio station uses. That's why I call radio frequency waves. So actually, MRI can take different kinds of pictures. So much like you can take different kinds of picture of the same subject. So here on the left side here you see a house, and on the right part here, that's what humans see, because humans are sensitive to visible light spectrum. But you can also see this infrared image of the house. So it gives you the heat signature of that object. And some animals like snakes or bullfrogs, they are sensitive to that infrared spectrum. So this infrared image might be what these animals see, what the house look like. Similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, the ultraviolet. So some butterflies actually can see beyond the ultraviolet light spectrum. So on the left image here is the butterfly that we see, but to butterflies, this might be what they see, right? So, and similarly, MRI image allows you to look at different properties of the brain and take different kinds of the images. This allows us to see different properties of the brain. On the far left here, you see what we call T1 weighted images. it's very good to study the anatomy of the brain. So on this outer ring, that's the bright thing, that's your scalp. And then deeper into it, you get this grayish thing, that's gray matter. These are kind of the mini computers of your brain. So your brain have a lot of neurons, and the gray matter has the body of the neurons. So these are, again, the mini computers of your brain. Deeper into the brain, you get this a big chunk of white thing. These are what we call white matter tracks. So these are actually the internet of your brain. So it connects all those mini computers that allows you different parts of the brain to coordinate with each other. On the middle image here, you see the flare image, and it's very sensitive to some lesions. So you can probably see there's a small white thing here. So that's a very small vascular lesion. So on the far right here, you get this beautiful color image. That's an image that we take by measuring the movement of water in your brain. So again, this is T1 weighted image. Again, it's very good at looking at anatomy. So here on the far left, we get this image from a cognitive normal subject. The middle image showed a T1 weighted image from a patient with a mild cognitive impairment. On the far right, from an Alzheimer's disease patient. And as the disease progresses, you can see the gray matter and white matter actually start to have volume losses. And those are filled by the cerebrospinal fluid, and they are depicted by this dark region here. And then you can see that there are more dark regions when, from images with in patients with Alzheimer's disease. So again, and then we can further use image processing tools to process the images. I don't know whether there's a mouse to play that video. Maybe I can click and then we'll play. Yeah, it does. So you can process it to segment the images to different brain regions, and also use it to generate this beautiful rendering of your brain. We actually started to do 3D printing of your brain and then give that out. So that's the, and actually the brain model is created from this T1 weighted image, and then we send it to 3D printer to print those brain models. We also have these diffusion images. So again, it measures the movement of water in the brain. So in the middle images here, the green color depicts the white matter tracks in that particular location is running left and right. Red color represents the tracks going anterior, posterior, meaning just front to back of your image, of your brain. And then blue color represents that the tracks is going through the plane here. So we can also connect the lines and then visualize the entire length of the white matter tracks as depicted on the bottom right images here. So in the following few slides, I'm going to share some of the analysis we have, quantitative analysis we have done using the data we obtained. So in this image, it's called R2 star image. It's very sensitive to iron content in the brain. So we know, can I go back? Yeah, in the brain, there's high iron content in the cortex of the neurons of the brain. We call it cortex. But there's also a region deep inside the brain called basal ganglia. This region is known to accumulate iron naturally. So the question is, well, does your brain accumulate more iron and quote unquote get rusty? The answer is yes. So when we compare people who are younger subjects versus those who are cognitive normal older subjects, we see widespread increase in this R2 star index. Again, it's an index for iron, as depicted in this red and yellow color here. And perhaps more interestingly, when we compare people with a positive AD biomarker from their CSF sample versus those who have a negative CSF AD biomarker, we see increased ion deposition in these basal ganglia region depicted by this purple and blue region here. And then it indicates that in early stage, maybe the AD pathology is associated with the disruption in the brain ion metabolism and homeostasis in the brain. So, and the levels of R2 star or ion index, it's correlated with the performance of visual spatial function. And most of us might remember resting state fMRI. So this another kinds of image we take. So probably all of you who participate in the study remember we ask you to show up this plus sign and ask you to focus your eyes on the plus sign without thinking anything in particular. That was probably hard. So, and while you do that, we take an entire volume of your brain every 2 seconds. It's like taking a video of your brain activity. But don't you worry, we don't know what you're thinking, or we cannot know your passwords. So, and then using this data, we can study how different parts of the brain are connected to each other using the principle that's famously summarized by this quote: neurons that fires together, wires together. So in this particular analysis, we look at the connectivity of the hippocampus with other parts of the brain. So hippocampus are these colored region in 2 different planes, and probably many people might know hippocampus is very important for memory function and other cognitive function. We look at how hippocampus is connected to other parts of the brain, which is shown on the bottom panel of the images here. And then when we compare the hippocampal connectivity between healthy younger subjects and then cognitive normal older subjects, we see reduction in hippocampus connectivity. That means the connection between the functional connection between your hippocampus with other parts of the brain is slightly reduced when someone gets older. That's kind of expected. Perhaps more interestingly is when we compare those who have positive AD biomarker versus those who have negative AD biomarker, we see an increase in the hippocampus connectivity. That's probably counterintuitive. We have hypothesized the other way around. However, it's possible this involves some compensatory mechanism, but it's also possible there's some hyperactivity of the hippocampus that might be pathological. So in further study is needed to better understand this. Another thing, measurement we did is MRI allows us to quantify the metabolites of the brain using a technique called MR spectroscopy. Here we see as someone ages, there's an increase in the metabolite called myoinositol when someone ages, and then the positive AD pathology is associated with a further increase in this myoinositol level. So, and myoinositol is believed to reflect neuronal inflammation. And we also found that myoinositol level actually correlates with the CSF biomarker of AD as well as the memory function. So if someone has higher myoinositol level, the memory function is worse. But this relationship only exists among those who have positive AD biomarker, but not in negative, in participants with negative AD biomarker. So, yeah, the work is ongoing, and I'm really glad that we have all the funding support and then the support from the EHBS study team, and most importantly, I want to thank all of you for participating in this study, and with all of our collective efforts, I think we can advance towards a better healthcare for AD. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. Did you see what I did there? It was graceful, wasn't it? Lucky I wasn't crawling up on my knees. Okay. Our last but not least presentation is Dr. Cassie Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is an associate professor in the Wallace H. Coulter Department of Biomedical Engineering at Georgia Tech and Emory University School of Medicine. Dr. Mitchell's research focus is predictive medicine, the development and application of computational methods to identify causes, develop cures, and optimize patient care. Her translational research has received numerous awards, such as the American Neurological Association's Outstanding Young Investigator Award, the National Science Foundation Career Award, and the Chan Zuckerberg Diversity Leadership Award. Dr. Mitchell is also a 3-time Paralympic Games medalist for Team USA. Dr. Mitchell's motto in research and in life is never, never, never give up. She will be presenting on the role of artificial intelligence in predicting Alzheimer's disease. Please welcome Dr. Cassie Mitchell.
Thank you for that outstanding introduction. All right, can everybody hear me? Is this working? All right, good. Okay. All right, so I got into artificial intelligence and the ability to use these computer models to help make medicine better, largely inspired by my own personal experience. And that sounds a little bit selfish, but it's kind of true. The slide that you see up there shows 2 different pictures, and you may have heard the old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But sometimes what we see with our human eye isn't the whole story, and that's true with Alzheimer's disease as well. It doesn't necessarily, until it's really far along, we can't look back and say, hey, if we could have intervened at this earlier point, could we have had a different outcome? And that was kind of true with my life. If you look at the picture on the left, you see circa 14-year-old me, and I have this eye patch on, and you're like, she probably has a lazy eye. And you look at the other picture to your right, and you're like, she probably had a bad car wreck, and maybe a haircut along the way. But neither one of those are true, all right? But a little bit of data detecting can figure out how these 2 pictures are related, even when we can't see it with the naked eye. Wrong button. So there are no anomalies in medicine. There are only things that we do not yet understand. And artificial intelligence is one of those tools that we can utilize to help us better understand what's going on. So just to finish up my case study so that you can understand, I started out with a vision impairment that was misdiagnosed, and nobody thought much of it. You wear the eye patch. To this day, I have a black contact patch that you can't see, so that I only use the one eye. But what we didn't know is because I had been on asthma medications my entire life, including a steroid, that it was covering up something else. And had we known that, I wouldn't have been given 6 vaccines at age 18 and had an allergic reaction that 3 weeks later, I woke up and I couldn't move, and I haven't moved my legs since, and it affects my arms. It was something called neuromyelitis optica that affects your cervical spine and your eyes. We couldn't see that back at step 1, but now we know that's what it is. So that left me in a wheelchair, and I got treatment for the neuromyelitis optica, which is basically to shut down your immune system to keep the body from attacking itself. But then, 10 years later, in my 30s, here I have leukemia, diagnosed with leukemia. And so at each one of these stages, a doctor made a diagnosis that didn't connect all these dots. But now with tools like AI and the different things that we have, we can connect these relationships to see a pattern that had there had been an intervention at step 1 or 2, maybe we wouldn't have gotten to step 6. And that's what I hope to be able to help with you all and the lab that my students, we're working on trying to stop the Alzheimer's processes earlier or get you treatment earlier. Hopefully you don't ever have to have it, but if you do, so that it doesn't go full circle. All right? So before I move into the AI related to AD, just a little bit of primer on what artificial intelligence is. I know there's been a lot on the news about it, and it can sound really scary, all right? But it's not. Artificial intelligence is the use of machines or computers to learn from experience and to adjust to new inputs and perform human-like tasks, all right? You've been using artificial intelligence for a long time. Even before you had that smartphone that runs your life, you were watching weather forecasts that told you what you should wear and if you should bring an umbrella. So these computers are trained to accomplish very specific tasks, and they use a lot of data. So all the data that's collected at your visits is put into a computer, and these computers find patterns that even trained physicians may not be able to see alone. And then the physicians can look at the output of these models and help better direct care. So examples of AI in your regular life include the lane or park assist on your car, your Hey Siri, let's see if anybody's phone goes off when I said that, or Alexa. ChatGPT, if you don't know what that is, ask your grandkids, it's probably doing their homework. And search engines like Google and Yahoo, all right? But some of the problems with AI is it does have some known issues, and it makes people scared to use it in the healthcare setting. And we are trying to protect against some of the issues that it has, but it has a lot of upside as well. But the things that it is not, all right? So the fact that it says artificial doesn't mean it's not real, all right? It's not done by a human, it's done by a machine, so that's where that comes from. So it is actually real, right? It's not new, all right? It was rebranded. It is a mixture of physics, chemistry, statistics, and a lot of engineering, all right? And then in about 2015, we got cute and renamed it to artificial intelligence. But it's been around a long time, all right? The computers have just gotten better. The other misconception is that it only applies to robots, and that's not true, all right? It's not just robots. There's this big fear that AI will replace humans, and while it may replace some types of jobs, it is not going to replace Dr. Law. I've been assuring him of that, all right? So you still need your doctor. The computer is not going to fix you. It's just an assistive tool, right? AI, we try to make it objective, but as you know, search algorithms and all, they're never quite 100% objective. We do the best we can to make them fair, which is more than what we can say about some companies that I shall not name. And the idea that AI is always correct, that's not true either. It can make mistakes, so it's not perfect. So if you get a prediction and it says that you're at risk, we can't necessarily guarantee that that's true, all right? Just like the weather forecaster has a disclaimer on their forecast. So how does AI work? So at the top, we're comparing human learning, and at the bottom, machine learning. In the human learning, you have a human student, and in the bottom, for machine learning, we have this computer. In a regular classroom with students, human students, a teacher presents examples, and the students learn from these examples. Likewise, with the computers, it's shown many different types of data, patient data, and it learns by example. We tell it which patients we know for sure have Alzheimer's and which ones we know for sure do not, and it starts to learn the patterns of what that means. Then, if you're a human student, after you've been taking a class, you're probably going to get a study guide that helps you prepare for an exam. Likewise, the machine learning algorithm gets a study guide, and it learns these different patterns from your MRIs, your CSF, your surveys, and it tries to learn that in a protected environment. In the next step, we have in the human learning world an exam where students are given questions, and usually the questions are worded a little bit different than what you got on the study guide, but the concepts are the same. Such is the same with artificial intelligence. We give it a new set of patient data that it hasn't seen, all right? So it can't cheat, all right? And this new set of data can be used to make predictions. So the student graduates and the model gets an accuracy score. Right? So that's how this works. Right, so why do we need this? All right, so Alzheimer's disease is multifactorial, meaning there's not just one cause. ApoE is one risk factor, but there's lots of different things that go into it. And as Dr. Law and Dr. Parker pointed out, the symptoms start much later than when the pathology itself starts. So if we could intervene earlier, then maybe we could stop the symptoms from ever occurring. So the idea is if we could use artificial intelligence to sift through your data and figure out patterns that we as humans can't necessarily see, can we then say who's most at risk, and we start to say that they should be triaged or prioritized for earlier treatment. And so AI may be able to do this by helping us to predict what's ahead, much like the weather forecaster who's trying to predict the chance of rain. All right, so I use your CSF data, and I know this test isn't the favorite among patients. I would say it doesn't hurt a bit, but then I can't feel, so you know, no problem. You can do a CSF on me all day. It doesn't hurt. But we take your patient data, and what was measured is these peptides, which are small little pieces of proteins, and they can give us clues about what's going on in your cells long before any sort of overt symptoms are happening in your life. And one of our algorithms has identified a set of 8 peptides that are really important in determining the conversion from an asymptomatic state to a symptomatic state. And you may notice in panel B that ApoE is listed on there twice. So it is important, but it's not the only thing that we measure in terms of determining what is going to make you more likely to convert. So the idea is if we could stratify patients into control, that means that they have no evidence of pathology and no symptoms. Asymptomatics, which would be those that have the pathology in the CSF or risk factor, but they don't have symptoms. And then actual Alzheimer's is where you're having symptoms. But the asymptomatics, as you can see, is a much longer stage, and it has much more a mixture of people. Some of these people will stay asymptomatic a lot longer than other people. So the goal is to use this algorithm to separate out those who are going to stay asymptomatic for a longer time and be more like a control versus those who are going to convert faster and be symptomatic, right? Because if you're more quickly to convert, then we would want to intervene sooner than someone that is more likely to stay closer to the control stage. And so this AI separates the asymptomatic patients into those that are more control-like, and so they're at less risk of converting, and more AD-like. Right? So what it does, it first separates out during that training phase. It learns what a control in an Alzheimer's patient looks like. So controls are green, Alzheimer's are red. Then it learns these patients that kind of lie in the middle. They're orange. That's your asymptomatic group. And then it uses some unique algorithms to separate out that orange group into those that are closer to converting and to those that are closer to not. And while there is some kind of a rainbow striation, there's also folks that kind of flop sides, so it's not like a perfect clean separation. And so in the end, we have this stratified group where we can give each patient the likelihood that they're more likely to convert quickly or are they more likely to not convert as quickly. So these are done what's called T-SNE, which I won't bore you with the details on, but it's a clustering method that allows us to striate the patients. And so in terms of the progression, how this model works, right, is we start with that, the computer and the machine. The top is what I showed you earlier, just a general machine learning algorithm. The bottom is what we're doing with your data. So the example data is the EHBS data. And the next stage is the algorithm learned from these patterns, and it found these 8 peptides that were really important. But then we gave it data that wasn't your data. It was a different research center's data, all right? And it was the PET data. And we said, okay, we're giving you a different type of data and different patients. Can you still figure out who's asymptomatic and who of these asymptomatics, who's more likely to convert and who's not? And it turned out that our model was pretty good at that. And for that reason, from an AI standpoint, we have given it a graduation, all right? But it's not quite ready for in-clinic use, all right? But from an AI standpoint, it checks out. What about these 8 peptides, all right? So interestingly, one of the first peptides that goes awry in the spinal fluid is related to blood. And that's kind of cool because it means that there are some already out on the market, but it could be easier to be able to determine who might be getting this higher risk based upon a blood test rather than having to do the CSF. So right now we're doing CSF, and there are blood tests on the market, but they're not as good as the CSF measurements. The next thing that we see is the cytoskeleton. So the cytoskeleton is what is like the skeleton of the neuron. And so that starts to go bad in the early asymptomatic stage. Then we see the myelin. So the myelin is like the insulation on your electrical wires. If you don't have good insulation on your electrical wire, it's not going to conduct a signal. Then as we move further down the asymptomatic spectrum, this is the really critical one, sugar metabolism. The brain becomes really bad at metabolism and using energy. And then kind of in the very last stage, the synapse itself. So that's how neurons connect to one another. So if you can imagine like Legos that connect, if the neurons can't connect to one another, then they can't talk to one another. So then that's when you're into the symptomatic phase. So, and then lastly is the extracellular matrix, and that's kind of the group that holds the cells together beyond the synapse. But the critical point is this sugar metabolism, and that's what we really want to look at moving forward is what is it about the metabolism of sugar in the brain that leads to this change from asymptomatic to symptomatic. All right, so summing it up here, again, Alzheimer's disease is multifactorial, and there's this really long asymptomatic stage that happens ahead of time. The AI is able to use your CSF peptides in order to figure out if you're closer to converting or if you're more likely to stay in an asymptomatic control-like state. And the sugar metabolism is kind of the linchpin to this. Future AD therapies may be more successful if we can identify patients earlier and give you treatment before you have actual symptoms. So we would like to be able to use this AI technology in the clinic under physician control in order to make the best decisions on when you should get therapy and the risk associated with that. So the bottom line is we need more longitudinal data in order to assure that this model is working correctly and that it could be used in an in-clinic setting. And so we really thank you for your assistance in getting that longitudinal data that'll make models like this available to everyone to try and combat this disease. The rolling credits, the funding, thank you for your tax dollars. Acknowledgements. This is a picture of my graduate students, the Laboratory of Pathology Dynamics. I want to especially give a shout out to Mr. Ragoff Tandon, ML PhD student whose work I'm presenting today. I think he's over here in the corner. You want to wave, Ragoff? All right. Dr. Law, who works with us to give us the data, because I am not a clinician, but most importantly, you. All right? Without your participation, we couldn't be making these kinds of progresses to help fight Alzheimer's disease. And then you'll see this little sign down there, and it was read earlier by a JC. If you only remember one thing I said today, I hope that you remember to never, never, never give up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitchell. Okay, guys, we're at the Q&A portion. So we have questions here that have come through on my phone that the team has sent me. But for people at the table who've written questions on a sheet of paper, if you want to kind of hold them up, volunteers are going to come around and get them from you. Okay? And then they'll get them up to us on stage. But in the meantime, we're going to get going because we want to get to as many as we can. So just know I'm not texting anyone on my phone right now. This is how the questions were brought to me. Obviously, these experts know which one of them is best to answer these questions, so I'm just going to throw them out to the group en masse. When will we have a chance to learn about what our CSF biomarkers show?
Where's Kate? So you see that young lady back there in the corner? So she needs to finalize our submission to the Institutional Review Board. But I will tell you, they invited me to their annual retreat, and we talked about this specific topic, about disclosing biomarker information to cognitively normal individuals. And so I had a chance to pre-prime them, and we took an informal vote after I presented that, and the large majority of the IRB members thought that it was appropriate to disclose that information with the appropriate educational material. So I don't anticipate a problem, but once the IRB has approved it, we will send out information about what you need to do if you want to pursue getting that information back.
Are efforts being made to bring persons of other cultures into the study? Does cultural identity matter when researching brain health?
I can answer that one. I think the answer is yes. And that's because different diseases manifest differently in different groups of people. You're learning a lot about lifestyle biomarkers, and people who come from different cultures, different countries, have different lifestyle practices. And those are the kinds of differences we're trying to better understand in researching brain health. So it's very important for all groups of people to participate. It's important because the information that we gain has to be generalizable to the general population. So if the study only includes men, what's learned may not be appropriate for women. So if the study only includes white men, it might not be appropriate for white females, black females, Eurasian females, Native Americans. So we need everybody's DNA, we need everybody's whatever to see what the differences are and to see what might be a better fit. So all of the medicines that all of us take have been tested in different groups of people. We know that different medicines are more efficacious in some people than they are in others, and that's what research is for. So everything's not going to be perfect for everybody, but everybody's ethnicity, their gender, their culture, their genetic makeups have a role in any disease process. We just don't know what they are, so we can't give you all of those answers. But the more people we have to compare, we can create, I like Cassie's model, we can create an algorithm and put it in her AI machine and try to understand what the differences might be. But we need everybody because we don't know what the differences are. We don't know what the precursors are.
I read in a neuroscience book, The Paradox of Wisdom, about 15 years ago that in general, we reach the height of our cognitive processing speed at the age of 17 to 19, and then experience a slow linear decline the rest of our life. Wow, stick a fork in me. Is this still the current understanding of the science?
Me?
I want to hear what
I
Deqiang has to say.
I don't think there's enough evidence to say specifically at which age your intelligence reaches a peak. We constantly need to learn, and actually biologically people used to think the regeneration of neurons or synapses that kind of stop at certain age, very young, but recent findings found that actually in hippocampus there are a lot of kind of quote-unquote regeneration of some of those processes. So you continue to learn. So I wouldn't think you reach a certain peak, but yes, once you get older, there are some degeneration processes kicks in. And you also, like Dr. La mentioned, that one of the biggest factor is education. And I take education not necessarily as kind of formal education. So if you constantly learn things, stimulate your brain, then you basically use it or lose it, right? So, and another key factor is exercise, so maintaining good activity that really beneficial. Probably that's one of the universal treatment to probably many other diseases, including brain health, but really quite universally applicable treatment.
I just want to do a quick survey. How many of you think you were more intelligent when you were 17 to 19 than you are now? Do you have a 17 to 19-year-old? Are you kidding me? I think we just debunked it.
I think we might, if we ask the 17 to 19, they might think they are the smartest.
You're right.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for the types of therapies and their mechanism of action to prevent or slow progression of Alzheimer's disease?
So I guess I'll take that one. So I mentioned that there was a new drug approved, and it's a drug called lecanemab or Leqembi, and we've started giving that drug to our patients with very early stage Alzheimer's disease. And what it does is that amyloid pathology is literally cleared away out of the brain. And that's something we've known we've been able to do for a long time. The problem is, if you wait too long, removing that doesn't help, because you saw there was a whole sequence of events that Cassie alluded to in the progression from silent disease to symptomatic disease. And during that entire evolution, that amyloid pathology is present. So it's triggering all of these activities to happen. And so if you wait too long, removing the offending agent isn't going to do anything. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to wind up using a combination of therapies. I think the amyloid removing drugs will be one aspect of it. But there is also work being done to look at things that will eliminate the tau pathology, the tangle pathology. We know that there's a lot of involvement of immune function in many of these sort of processes that go wrong in the evolution of Alzheimer's disease. So I think all of those are going to come into play, and as we go forward, we're also going to figure out what types of treatments are appropriate for what individuals, for their particular sort of flavor of Alzheimer's, because it's quite different across individuals. But I think there's going to be certain aspects, including amyloid-targeted therapies, that will be one of the earlier ones that proves to be able to slow or prevent disease.
You may have answered this, but to what degree do all of the other research efforts around the world collaborate, share study results, and more?
I think we can both do that. I think that when it comes to drug development, just about every country is working on the same drug in similar ways. I think that when it comes to diagnostics, when you go to the Alzheimer's International Conference, a lot of researchers are presenting different data on similar aspects of dementia evaluation and care. And so there is a collaboration. Everything that we do here is not necessarily mirrored in other parts of the world, but other parts of the world are doing similar studies and doing something different. An example would be what we call the finger study. It's a study on diet. It started up in, I'm going to say Greenland. I think that's right. Whatever, it's European. Okay, the significance is the diet of those people who lived in that area is very different from the diet that we would eat here in the United States. So here in the United States, we tried to do something similar with a different study. We gave it a different name and tried to adapt the dietary habits of Americans to see if we could get similar results. So yes, scientists around the world do collaborate and they do partner, but things are different in different countries.
But one other thing that I think it's important for all of you to know, we safeguard your private information, but we also want the data that comes from your participation to be used as broadly as possible. So nobody is hoarding, well, people do, but we're not interested in hoarding data or specimens. And so we have processes in place for people to be able to access the data and to request imaging data or request blood or spinal fluid samples. We don't, generally speaking, we look a little bit with a jaundiced eye at commercial entities, but other academics who have a legitimate research question that we think we can help with, we want to share so that your contributions can really reverberate much more than what we're doing here locally.
Yeah, to add to that, and really, I mean, all the findings are really widely published, and so people can see so it's common for academic to publish, and then that results be accessible. And then we have Emory Healthy Brain Study, but we also have Emory Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, right? And then there are, Dr. Parker mentioned, there are 37 of them in the country. So there is a centralized effort to aggregate the so-called de-identified data so that the data can be used broadly to answer questions we might not be studying locally, but that might be the focus of other investigators.
What is normal cognitive ability for an individual between 60 and 70?
I'm going to let Jim help with that one.
I think Dr. Mitchell can take that one. She's been awfully quiet.
What is normal? Normal's overrated. I mean, so I'm not a clinician, so I don't know why you're asking me. But what you would like for people to have in their 60s, 70s, that you should still be able to live an active, independent life, right? So no matter what the algorithm says or what your CSF says, you want to be able to recognize your loved ones, you want to be able to do your activities, and so, what's normal isn't going to be the same for every individual, but the main thing is that you have a certain degree of independence and fulfillment. And so, that's why even if you're retired, we see that it's important for people to engage socially, but also like crossword puzzles and things like that, because as was pointed out earlier, if you don't use it, you do lose it. And that's not dementia, that's just the way biology works, right? So
That's a good answer.
that's in my non-clinician answer.
Taylor made me do my Healthy Brain Study cognitive testing this week. And I don't know how any of you guys feel about it, but I just want to make sure that my name is off of that thing before any of my staff look at it. I will say, we're all stressed by those cognitive measures, and when we look at those, we are looking at it based on norms that are adjusted for age and educational background. However, what I will say is, having been doing this several years now, what we are realizing is that some of you suck at some of these tests, and you suck at it the next time and the next time, but you're fine on the other stuff. And so so what's normal for one, and I'm getting less confidence in these normative scores, and what I'm much more concerned about is whether the cognitive measures show decline from normal, your personal normal. So I think that's something that we have a hard time doing, defining what is normal for you, not what's normal for every 60-year-old with a college education. And that's how we've done things traditionally, but what we're doing really is being able to compare you against yourself now as we go forward.
Can we use DNA to detect the disease or to calculate the risk of an individual getting the disease?
Yes, but it's not very good. So we worry about that ApoE gene because it is overwhelmingly the most important risk gene. But even if you have the worst possible combination of that ApoE gene, does not mean you're doomed to get Alzheimer's disease. In fact, the best polygenic risk score models that I've seen really don't do a whole lot better than the ApoE gene. And so if you're looking at predictive accuracy, they tend to run in the 80, 83% accuracy range. It's not very good. You don't want to get that data from ApoE testing and say, ooh, I'm doomed, and then use up your entire retirement account running through your bucket list, because 20 years from now you're going to be like living on Social Security because you got nothing left. So the genetics is sort of, it's one of those things where you're stuck with your genetics, and you're stuck with your genetics from the moment of conception. And so what you should really be focusing on is what we've been talking about, those lifestyle things that are going to help you to be more resilient against age and disease-related changes, and then we'll do everything that we can to come up with other measures to help you along. But you should all be doing that. We should all be doing that to safeguard ourselves.
What is defined as early-stage Alzheimer's disease? And this question is in reference to the ability to use the new drugs.
So there are actually well-defined criteria for that. The approval is based on the clinical trial that was conducted by ASI. And they used certain criteria for eligibility in the study. And so those criteria are what are being used for eligibility for the drug. And that's for people who have definite Alzheimer's disease based on biomarker testing and are at a stage of symptoms where they have either mild cognitive impairment, which means people have definite decline in their cognitive abilities from what is normal for them, but it's still very mild, and generally people are still completely independent. Some may even still be, practicing, winding down their law or medical practices, so very mild, or very mild dementia, meaning a little bit further along than that, but still very high functioning. And there are some threshold values that were used on some cognitive tests as an objective measurement of that, which has limitations. But there's a threshold score on something called the mini mental state exam, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and something called the Clinical Dementia Rating Scale. And so it's a complicated process in assessing eligibility, but some of the criteria that we are really focused on are safety criteria. We don't want to use these drugs in people who may be at very high risk of developing swelling or bleeding, which are very real considerations with these drugs. Plus, remember, these are IV infusion drugs that have to be given every 2 weeks for a minimum of 18 months. It's going to cramp your damn lifestyle for sure. But it's an important advance.
One other thing, just to add what's early, to clarify the definition. The way we think of early Alzheimer's is when your symptoms occur before the age of 65. I think that some people say, oh, she's forgetting a little bit, that's early Alzheimer's. The way we think of it is when you start to be symptomatic, it's before age 65 or after age 65.
So early onset, meaning early age at onset, to be discriminated from stages of disease, so early Alzheimer's disease. And we hear that a lot, but we know what you mean. But people who develop disease at a very young age, in their 50s or early 60s, we think of as unusually young age at onset.
Do over-the-counter memory supplements work? Listen, I'm surprised they let me finish the question. I've asked this many times before.
This
That's
is
it. No.
Okay, no. I think that's the appropriate answer. The answer is no. There are a lot of supplements that you can purchase, but what I like to tell people is if you have a true, let's say, folate or folic acid or vitamin B12 or vitamin D, as in David, deficiency, we prescribe medications to treat that. Everything you read, everything that's advertised on television, YouTube, whatever, is not necessarily effective. There isn't necessarily science behind it. So if you're worried that you're missing some kind of mineral, some kind of vitamin, get your doctor to do a test to check a level. But there is no evidence to support that Prevagen, that's the one I think everybody likes.
Oh, Lord, all the time.
Works.
The only truth in the Prevagen commercial is the disclaimer at the end that says this product is not designed to diagnose or treat any medical condition.
All right, well, let me just ask this. What about, can certain foods, be beneficial to the brain? We've heard about the mind diet. I mean, not supplements, but food.
Cassie.
Yeah, so some of the algorithms that I didn't present today, but have looked at natural supplements and the effect on cognition. And it is, as Dr. Parker mentioned, vitamin D, but especially if it's taken naturally through what you eat, is better than the pills. But the vitamin D, the omega-3, so like the healthy fish and some types of nuts, very, very helpful. And anything that's anti-inflammatory, there's a big inflammatory component to the disease. So if you tart cherries, blackberries, blueberries, any of those types of berries, and I say that not only as someone who studies cognition, but also like from terms of athletic performance. I've had plenty of people try to say, oh yeah, these supplements, that's gonna make you stronger faster. And it's really not. The best thing is what you put in your mouth naturally, but be very conscious of that. And then sugar, trying to lower the amount of sugar. The sugar, especially the fake sugars and like stuff in Coke and all the things that we like, that needs to be in moderation because that seems to have a big impact on how quickly the body deteriorates.
I don't think there's any OTC per se, but you have at-home therapy that's daily activity, right? And also in general control any like dietary that control all the like hypertension, so make sure those are well controlled. Actually, vascular contribution is probably one of the largest contribution to the development of cognitive impairment besides these MO and tau. So if you control that and then really indirectly make sure your diet's it's kind of don't increase your blood pressure and all that. So I think really exercise and just common sense diet will help you.
We like to say heart healthy. What's good for your heart is good for your brain.
Exactly.
But your heart is there mainly to pump blood to the penthouse.
Okay.
What is the relationship of statins or cholesterol and Alzheimer's?
I can answer that one. That has to do with the vascular risk factors that Dr. Chu has just talked about. High cholesterol, hypertension, all make it more likely that you develop symptoms that are consistent with strokes. Okay, we talked about vascular risk factors. There are things that cause strokes, and strokes are associated with dementias. Not necessarily Alzheimer's, but they are associated with neuronal degeneration and dysfunction. So that's why that's important. So high cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes that's not well controlled, those are what we call vascular risk factors, and those are very much associated with the development of cognitive dysfunction later on, especially if they're uncontrolled.
Are you also looking at other dementias, especially Lewy body dementias?
Yes. So we in the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, we are actually creating a separate cohort of volunteers specifically to study Lewy body diseases. And then when I say Lewy body diseases, I'm including Parkinson's disease, dementia with Lewy bodies, Parkinson's disease dementia, these things that are all associated with this pathology called Lewy bodies made up of alpha-synuclein that we didn't talk about. We can't, it's harder to do that in a prospective sort of healthy brain study design because it's not nearly as common as Alzheimer's disease. Part of the tragedy and advantage of Alzheimer's disease is it's so awfully common that we can in fact, we need a large number, but we can in fact identify sufficient numbers of people who have silent disease because it's so common. But we don't have that advantage with Lewy body diseases or frontotemporal dementias or other conditions. But we focus specifically in certain areas to try and study those non-Alzheimer's related causes of cognitive decline and dementia.
And a lot of times that these different neurodegenerative processes coexist in the same individual. People of color don't necessarily have just pure Alzheimer's. I have a 98-year-old mother who actually has Alzheimer's pathology, but she's also suffered a number of strokes. So these diseases can coexist, these pathologies, these multiple pathologies can exist in the same individual.
I have one final question because I know that all of you here, the majority of you here, have made such a big commitment to this study. And as we close out, I'd like to go down the table and have each of you share, and yes, this can call for you to opine. What is the one thing, in your opinion, that people should or can do to protect their cognition?
I'll save the rest. I just increase your daily activity through exercise or some other things.
Do everything that we've told you to do that keeps you healthy. So the best way not to have disease is to prevent it. So the annual wellness visit for those of us who are over the age of 65, check your hearing, check your cholesterol, check the things that we've told you to check. Get your colonoscopy. Why? You don't want to die from colon cancer. So you might have dementia, you may be crazy as hell. But you're going to die from colon cancer because you didn't take care of it. So get your mammogram, get your prostate checked, get your hearing checked, clean your teeth on a regular basis, get your vision checked, stay healthy.
What? Stay healthy, and we look at the quadriplegic at the table with cancer, right? I would say don't live in fear, right? When you're participating in a study like this, I know it sounds scary every time you go, like, did I decline? Did I this? Did I that? But you be proactive, but you live your life. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
So Jay, she just committed plagiarism by asking that question.
Of myself?
Yeah. Same question you asked when you and Kenny were doing videos.
Yes, well, that's because we have an Alzheimer's dinner next week, and I did ask you that question.
I'm going to give the same answer because I still
That's fine. They haven't seen it.
But now it'll be a duplicate of what's on the video that you guys
I think it's okay. Are all of you going to the dinner? I think it's okay.
Okay. So in fact, if any of you have been watching Your Fantastic Mind, in season 2, there was an episode that Jay did with something called the Rush Religious Order Study, which is a long-term study of Catholic sisters, priests, monks, who all agreed to participate in a long-term study and give their brains and do cognitive testing. After they die, they give their brains, just to be clear. And we've been actually studying the brains from the religious order studies, doing these proteomic studies, looking at their protein content. And there was always something strange about that group of brains. We'd get brains from Mayo, we'd get brains from our own brain bank, we'd get brains from Mount Sinai, from Banner Health. And there was always something that kind of stuck out with the religious order study. I am now convinced that it's because of what Jay highlighted in that episode, that the sisters that she interviewed, as she said, if you're a nun, you don't retire, right? You go from one fulfilling activity to when you're physically unable to another fulfilling activity to another fulfilling activity in a supportive environment until you die. And I've become a real believer in the importance of purpose in life. Doing things that keep you engaged, keep you feeling connected, and like you have a reason, a purpose for being there, I think is critically important to sustaining our long-term brain health and resiliency. And then do what Cassie said, never, 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 never give up. I think that's what I would do.
Perfect. I have to say very quickly, that's one of our favorite stories we've ever done for the show. And that story won an Emmy, and we mailed it to the nuns for them to have, even though they don't, and they like it. And a couple of them who are all in their 90s are now my Facebook friends. So it's lovely. It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for sharing your brains and your bodies and your time with us. If you are interested in the study, please go to one of the tables out there. If you want to make an appointment for your next follow-up, please go to a table out there. The parking lot shuttle will be leaving at 2:30. Thank you again. Safe travels home. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next year.